Good morning, everyone. My name is Oyeyemi Ezekiel Opeoluwa. I'm also the campaign manager for African Voices against Killer Robots. I want to welcome us all to today's session of the African Voices Against Killer Robots Academy. I'll be talking on the role of young people in the quest to stop killer robots in Africa, just like that you mentioned earlier on. Well, to start with, I want us to actually consider two major issues from the topic itself. And that would be the first thing I want us to consider is youth. And to actually talk about youth, we know youth are generally young people, vibrant adolescents. But I want us to consider the definition of youth because it is quite tricky and it's something that is mostly being is being defined as per relations and regions of the world and countries of the world. But I will first of all want to highlight the definition of youth as defined by United Nations, which we all know is the supreme organization in the world. The United Nations defines youth. Okay, yeah, thank you. That's right. Define youth as people living between the ages of 15 and 24. But in other continents, especially Africa, like ours and sub-region, sub-Saharan region of Africa, we, because of the specialty and how spectacular we are in Africa, ours is kind of different and because of the situation of things in Africa. So we extended it beyond that to 35. So the second issue I want us to talk about is, the issue of killer robots. I want to believe from yesterday's discussion, we will know by now that killer robots are weapons, a weapon system that would select an attack target without meaningful human control. I'm sure yesterday's discussion must have covered that. But this means the decision to employ lethal weapon will be delegated to a machine. That's like the right to kill, the opportunity to pull the trigger to the final civil life is delegated to machine. That's why any machine that can actually think about doing that can engage in doing that without any human intervention, that can just take that other kill. Those are the machines that we call killer robots, and they are also known as autonomous weapon system. The interesting thing is that this far-reaching development would fundamentally change the way war is being conducted around the world. And some people are actually call this the third revolution in warfare. If you remember very well, there were two world wars that had been fought. The First World War, the Second World War. The First World War was majorly fought with gunpowder, but the Second World War, what characterized it was actually the invention of atomic bombs that was deployed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. And till now, if we still remember our history lessons very well, we know that Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the effect of that bomb, they are still suffering from it till now. So because of that and because of the progression of warfare, so people actually academics and philosophers and humanitarians, they actually position us that if this case of killer robots is not stopped, if we eventually bring it to fulfillment and the countries killing to it, they will actually categorize. They're actually saying it's what will be the end of mankind. Some of us might be thinking killer robots is a myth, is something that is not real. But believe me, I want to tell you that killer robots is not a myth. It is real. I can categorically tell us that as of now, there are two major robots that has actually been fully developed and ready to be used by two major countries in the world, and two others are still under development. They are still under construction, majorly by the U.S. Pentagon. We know they are the military headquarters for the United States of America. So, United States of America, they are working voraciously to make sure they effectively develop Sea Hunter. Sea Hunter is a warship, navigating warship that hunts down every form of submarine. I'm seeing the introduction part. I'm seeing the introduction part. Thank you. Let's leave the slide that way. Thank you. So the sea hunter is saddled with that responsibility to seek, hunt, and the interesting thing about this sea hunter that is being developed by the Pentagon is that it can actually operate without human. The operational, the schematics of it being developed is set to be such that it can operate for like 2 to 3 months at a time without human intervention. So that means once they launch it at sea, the unfortunate thing is that it can perceive any ship that is in that environment. It is emitting the same signals that other enemy ships are emitting. This warship, sea hunter, will hunt the ship down and attack such ship. And these are some of the adverse effects of such of weapons like these killer robots that we are vying against. And also there's a robot that we call the neuron. Yeah, before I venture too much, I just want to correct our belief that when we are talking about killer robots, it does not necessarily mean to be iron cast machines that looks like human beings. Because some of us, we have seen some of these scientific movies that project into the future, like Terminator Genesis and some other movies in that line. They project killer robots as machines that have with human form, with human physique, but they have red laser eyes, but that can seek human, hunt them down and kill. So, but the interesting thing, the similarity between the description they're giving us in that movie, in movies as such, and what the reality of killer robots today is just that it is the action that those machines in those movies, it is the action that they are taking that is similar with what the real killer robots are really engaging, because in movies as such, they act based on algorithms. They act based on code they were imprinted in their neural system, because they're constructed in such a way that the neural system is codified already. So example is the same way with this sea hunter. Before this sea hunter can effectively stay for 2 to 3 months without human intervention, we should know that yes, it has to be running on code that will fix any error, that will sustain, that will make sure the maintenance of the one machine is going on smoothly without human effort. So with this, I don't want to really dwell too much on this because we really have a lot of things to talk about. But I want to say with the critical functions that some of these killer robots, if we have time, we can really go through some of them. We have the happy also and the neuron. The neuron that I was talking about the other time is especially developed by the by France. It is still under development and it's developed to be a stealth weapon. What I mean by stealth is it cannot be identified by any radar system in the world. It is always undercover and it can fly autonomously without any pilot for 3 hours and it can just perform. Just imagine the kind of havoc such a very powerful weapon can just cause. People will just be perplexed and be amazed that something bad happened in a place, but they don't know where to trace it from because the machine that caused the havoc is still there is no radar system that can develop it. This is just the minute of the many things, the many killing machines, robots that can kill that nations of the world are just building. And it's very important for us as youth that these things are still under development and as critical stakeholders in the future of the world, we need to take action by ourselves to make sure before this thing go too far, we put an end to it. We put an end to it by ban. And interestingly, when I mean to ban, it means we are also following the steps of other campaigns that actually stop so many weapons as such that are detrimental to mankind. Example of such weapon is the laser light. Initially, laser light was banned because when it was discovered that the capabilities involved in it is detrimental to mankind, and anybody in the area where laser light weapons are deployed, anybody, irrespective of being a child, a youth, a woman, or a people with disabilities, everyone there will be affected. So, because of situations like that, they eventually sought to nations and organizations around the world sought to the eventual ban of laser light. So I want us to see this our campaign to stop killer robots. Let's not see that something new that has never been done. Yes, we are following the footsteps of others that are gone ahead of us to preserve this world for us and to also preserve it also for the generations that will be coming after us. So, with all this being said, you might just be wondering, okay, thank you. Why do we youth need to ban killer robots? Sorry, why do we need youth need to ban killer robots? Like I have been saying also, it is very important for us youth. We are critical stakeholders. We are critical stakeholders to this campaign because we are the ones that will live with the consequences of decisions that are being made right now. If we fail to take concrete action to make sure killer robots we ban it, there are so many things that are bound to happen. We are here because generations ahead of us took conscious steps to consciously shape the face of the world, warfare in the world, to favor us and to make sure that we that will be succeeding them, we actually live a better life. So now as youth now, our contribution to the ban is very critical and very important because one, this killer robot of the thing that we are talking about has ethical issues and ethical concerns that I really want us to um, pay cognizance of. When we are talking about killer robots, as I said earlier on, they do not have respect or value for human life. They work on algorithms, they work on codes. This means a robot will not be able to make a key decision that takes into account implicitly or explicitly human dignity. It is simply completing the task it was programmed to do, and this devalues and dehumanizes the decision and does not respect the value we place on human life. So what I mean by this is it contradicts the principle of human dignity and right to life. It will just not take into consideration because to kill human being, there are so many things that are involved. There are so many things that are involved. A programmer might just program a killer robot to identify anyone with maybe a camouflage clothes as a soldier or anyone with any structure or image that looks like a toy as a soldier or just anyone or anything that is covered with veil. So this is bringing me to the point of the programmer's prejudice can actually if like influence the decision of some of these killer robots. Just imagine a robot that has been specified to just identify anybody with wearing camo uniform. Even when you are in your house or maybe when you are walking on the streets, because of the progression of things now, there are nations that are projecting to eventually convert their policing system to be operated by robots. So when countries like this eventually bring this into existence or bring this into fruition, people that are just walking on the streets with camo might just be identified as with camouflage materials of maybe warring faction or their enemies might just be identified as threats, and eventually that might cause them to be tagged as a threat to the nation. And there's still another example that I just saw on the internet some times ago. There was an example of a professor made the example of a girl that was just walking on the street that could just easily take a ice cream and just point it to maybe a police officer or a soldier, but the soldier might just understand like, oh, this is just a little girl. She does not mean any harm. She's just being friendly. But just imagine a girl as such with a toy gun. What I mean by a toy gun, just pointing it to a robot that has already been programmed that anything that looks like a gun is actually a gun. So such a situation, when a girl as well just uh, point it to the robot might categorize the girl as threat. And the ethnic component that is actually moving us to push that is actually moving us to push for the ban of this killer robots of a thing is something that is very vast that we cannot really exhaust. Do we really want to if we want to consider the ethnic component, where people might just be categorized based on racial segregation, maybe because of the race they are representing, that is influencing or affecting, or that is yes, the race that they belong to, that is affecting and making them to be actually labeled as threats to the nation. Do we really want to consider that aspect also? So the ethnicity part of it is something that is very big that we cannot exhaust. So there's another reason why I want we youth to push for the need to ban killer robots. Is the second thing here, that killer robots would lead to a new form of arms race. Yes. When I'm talking about arms race, I'm talking about the Cold War. If you remember very well, the Cold War that was fought between the two major powers of the world after Second World War was majorly because of the new weapon that came to be after the end of World War II, nuclear power. So that tore the world into two major sections that was divided by the Iron Curtain. So just imagine when killer robots come into fruition, and we have been made to realize that it has limitless power because of AI that will be incorporated into it. We are not saying killer robots is not saying AI is not good. Killer robots campaign to stop killer robots is not saying we are warring against AI. We are not warring against robotics. We are just against human not being able, machine taking the final decision, having the final say on life of human being, and human beings not being able to have that final say. It is very critical and it is very important. If you look at rapid development in robotics and artificial intelligence applied to military technology, will lead to an international arms race, which will have a destabilizing effect and threaten international peace and security. The period of Cold War in the world was a very strong one that tore the war into pieces. But I'm sure history will not want to, that kind of history will not want to repeat itself again. So it is very important for us as youth. We are the one with the strength, with the vigor to make sure killer robots that will cause such a serious havoc, like a Cold War almost brought like so to the end of the world. It was a period of harms. This country were competing against each other to have the most sophisticated nuclear power. So when killer robots are eventually come to fruition, it will be such a race that countries with enough financial capability, countries with strong military strength will be competing to make sure they have the most sophisticated killer robots in their command. So that anytime any country wants to attack them, they can easily just launch back. And what do we know? One of the effects of it is that we cannot envisage or just think about what the effect of two killer robots clashing together, clash of the titans. When just imagine two atomic bombs dropping together at the same time, the effect will be so devastating. It was just nitrous oxide that was wrongly stored that caused the explosion that happened recently some months ago in one of the countries in the world. I'm sure we've all heard about that. Just imagine two of that happening together in a single community at a time. It will have a devastating effect that will affect generations in such community. So this is why we are pushing and advocating for youth, that we are very important to help stop this harm race in artificial intelligence fused with robotics, fused with weaponized system for the military use without human intervention. So the third thing that I still want to push is killer robots can become uncontrollably proliferated to a wide range of actors. And when I'm talking about actors, I'm talking about government. I'm talking about security organizations, and I'm also talking about dictator nations. And when I'm talking about actors, I'm also talking about terrorist organizations in the world. These terrorist organizations, they are or they want their military prowess to even be greater or stronger than countries where they are wreaking havoc. So when killer robots become proliferated, what I mean by proliferated is that it becomes cheap and accessible for people to easily get. We know there are countries in the world where it is just normal, legal, with proper papers with proper documentation, you can easily go about with your arms, guns, just to protect yourself. But just imagine, and that could actually come to be because guns were made easily accessible. And the other aspect of it that I just want us to talk about to notice that even though, yes, with proper registration, you are licensed to carry gun in some country. But do you know that still people are still carrying guns that are not registered and that are not licensed? And with that, maybe when one of them just have issues with their mental health, they can just easily go to the streets and just start shooting around and just start killing people. Just imagine the kind of power embedded in these stuff that we are calling killer robots. They have strong power that they can wreak havoc, but it can be so easily proliferated, just like a gun was easily proliferated. Yeah, it can become once developed. Later autonomous weapon and killer robots can become relatively cheap to produce and simple to copy, and this increase the livelihood of their proliferation to a wide range of actors, including dictators and non-state actors, including private citizens. So it is very important for us as youth to push for this. For it is important. It is better for it not to even come into existence. For us to now be fighting for a safe killer robot campaign that only people with license can use it, or only people with that are registered something like that can use it. It is better for it not to come into existence, to protect our future, to protect the future generations that are coming down, for them to be like, oh, you could have just stopped this when this was still in the beginning stage, when it was still in the drawing stage. So the third thing that I want to talk about here is also that the fourth thing rather, that killer robots could lead to an increase in conflict. That means killer robots will lower the threshold of war. When I say killer robots will lower the threshold of war, I'm trying to say so many people are of the opinion, yeah, and I also believe that leader autonomous no, so many people believe that leader autonomous weapon could lead to a less casualty among attacking forces. But the interesting thing for us to note is that this could also lead to an increase in conflicts, because to lower the threshold of going to war, once we don't go to war, they'll be like, okay, let's just launch and create a sophisticated killer robot. We'll make it stealth. Maybe it is maybe it is United States of America Pentagon that will just advance their sea hunter system, or what do I call it? Their sea hunter, and make it stealth in such a way that it will just be under the submarines of nation, watching them and eventually launching an attack on them without them being known, without knowing. So it is very important for us to note that killer robots will drastically and seriously reduce the threshold of war. And when it reduces it, it will usher in a new stage where wars are being fought without knowing the origins of which some of these casualties of war are coming from. Nations can just attack nations without knowing who specifically launched and other such attacks. So the final thing that I want to just push towards the youth to take cognizance of is the accountability section of killer robots. Who will be accountable for it? When killer robots come into existence, when eventually, yes, we can still say some countries are developing this, and this, but it is still not too late for us, the youth, to make our voice heard. Our voices is the voice of the youth is very important to the success of this campaign. It's very important for us to represent the team life. We should support life by saying no to machines taking charge, to machines determining the fate, machine having the final say on who has the right to life or who has the right to know. All these that I've mentioned can now push us to the next slide. That will be like, what can we now do to be part of this great campaign and make sure that, okay, maybe we are pumped up by now to be like, okay, these things are dangerous. They are really dangerous. Who will take them accountable? Which general would trace killer robots back to that will be held responsible? Which country would trace it to that will held responsible. Or we just wake up one day and just see that someone else has just launched a a walking robot in the street. They just identify any woman walking with veil and just see them as terrorists and just kill them. So this is a future that is bleak, but we can still take concrete actions and actions that we can take as youth to make sure such a thing does not happen is that we can come together and make the world listen. The Global Coalition for the Campaign to Stop Killer Robot has a youth network where youth will come together. People under the age of 30, yes, I'm sure, yes, people under the age of 30, they'll just come together and develop ideas on how we can really push forward this campaign. Time is not really on our side. The race for advanced weapon system is on in nation. So we need to launch with super speed. We need to launch with a rate like a speed faster than the our speed needs to be even faster than the speed of light. Let me put it that way for us to catch up with them and make sure we stop them before they go too far, before nations go too far, before institutions that are promoting killer robots before they go too far. So we can come together as youth and make the world listen. We can make the world listen by raising awareness through our social media. Hashtag Team Human. We are all humans. We should not be pro robots that can kill. We should be anti-robots that can kill human beings. So we are. Let me still lay very strong emphasis on this. We are not against robotics. The campaign to stop killer robots is not against robotics. African Voices against killer robots. We are not against robotics. We are not against AI. We are only against robots that can kill without human intervention. No matter how vast we train them, they can never understand the ethics of human being because our ethics are very diverse and is not such that is structured. They cannot think like us. No matter how vast we say we input ethics into them. There are so many ethics that are coming to be, but they cannot catch up with our ethics. We are the most advanced being on earth. So it is very important for us to use our advancements, our intellectual advancement to still push for to save future generations. So the third thing we can still do as youth is to sign a petition saying that you do not support killer robots. There are petitions, and I'm very sure initially the convener of the event made mention that we'll be signing a youth position also. So you can just do that when the time comes for such. You can do that, append your signature, make it known, speak to others about it. That do you know about killer robots? Do you know about artificial intelligence? Do you know about advanced weaponry systems that the nations are proposing? So when we come together and with the youth, because we have the strongest power to influence change in the world right now. And anything we do now will affect our future and the future generations to come. When we come together and make sure the world knows this and we force the world to pause, to put an end to the production, the finance, the production, the finance, or the creation of cloud robots. Yes, I'm making the world safer again for the generations to come. So another thing we can do as youth to be a great part of this campaign is by nominating members of our campaign, our very own campaign, African Voices Against Killer Robots, to speak to your network. I'm sure we all have big, diverse network. So African Voices Against Killer Robots now brought people yesterday from the global campaign to come and speak to us, people that have passed on this knowledge also. Yeah, it is very important for us all to see ourselves as proclaimers of this message of stopping killer robots before they come to end us. So the future that is being portrayed in our sci-fi movies as Terminator, we don't want that to come to fruition. So the earlier the better. Why build resistance against killer robots when you can simply prevent? He said prevention is better than cure. The thing we can do most is just prevent with our voice, prevent with our action, and we are daring us to be determined. I'm daring each and every one of us listening to me in this webinar to be determined and to dare take bold step. Let's move to people, government. Let's spread the threat of climate change was not so combatant now, but now we can say people climate change is more of like a community discussion now. It's a household discussion because people took charge. They spread the gospel and make people they spread the message of climate change, the evil of climate change, the effect of climate change, and they made it very easily accessible for people to understand what it could cause for future generations. So we also let us take charge and just spread this message around. The message, spreading the message is the thing that we should see as very important for us to do. And also, I'm sure by the end of it all, just like the convener of this event mentioned earlier on, we'll all be campaigners. And when we become campaigners, that is just the beginning of the work. When we become a campaigner, we are saying, hold me responsible for everybody in my network who does not know about killer robots. Hold me responsible for anybody in my circumference of influence who I feel to tell about killer robots. So on the final note, because of our time, I would like to end with this. Like I want to implore each and every one of us here on this call, each and every one of us here on this webinar, to simply take concrete action to seize the ban of killer robots, because our generation and generations to come after us will face the consequences of everything that we do today. Thank you.